Hail, Tenno, and welcome to the Orokin Archives, a compendium of information on the Origin system. I'm Grey Archon, the curator. Today we'll be opening the archives and taking a look at the Archimedians, who they were and what they accomplished. This video contains spoilers for the Second Dream, the Sacrifice, and Angels of the Zariman. If you are not up to date on the story quests, you may wish to avoid this video until later. The Archimedians were a sect of scholars and scientists during the reign of the Orokin. They were often seen in the service of the Orokin executors, though individual Archimedians could be quite independent at times, and some were known to serve other masters besides the Golden Lords. Through their work in science and technology, the Archimedians had a marked influence on the state of the system, easily overlooked by those seeking a more dramatic impetus to events. Many facets of the Archimedian class are unknown to current records, but the details we have allow us to reconstruct an idea of how they existed in the old Orokin Empire. The Archimedians were among the oldest elements of Orokin society, their existence predating the discovery of the Void. Nonetheless, they are not mentioned by Albrecht Andrade as being involved in his fateful initial voyage across the fold of reality, one of the few pivotal moments in Orokin civilization absent their contribution. However, in the scientific revolution that followed, they likely worked closely with the Andrade family to further explore the Void and build upon Albrecht's work. By the time of the Zariman project, some Archimedians had specialized in Void technology, and several of them, under the leadership of Archimedian Yonta, were assigned to the Zariman to conduct its great void jump to the Tau system. Tragically, the Zariman's reliquary drive failed during the jump, and the ship was presumed lost with all hands. In the wake of this failed colonization project, an Archimedian named Parental, a member of Parvos Granum's Corpus faction, developed a race of intelligent, adaptable, self-replicating robots. These robots were intended to travel to the Tau system and terraform it for human habitation, in yet another bid for the Empire's expansion. Although these creations violated the Orokin prohibition against artificial intelligence, he colluded with Executor Ballas to gain approval from the Seven for his project. These robots, of course, would eventually come to be the Sentients. When the Sentients returned from Tau to visit their wrath upon their Orokin masters, many Archimedians, if not most, found their work now subordinated to the needs of the Old War. A great deal of research was devoted to the development of weapons, defenses, and other wartime projects, and the Archimedians, as the Orokin's preeminent scholars, would have been at the forefront of such efforts. The Sentients' ability to adapt their weaknesses and hijack advanced technology meant that a conventional approach of linear weapons development was not effective, and so the Archimedians' talents had to be devoted to unorthodox measures. One of the more promising developments were the fearsome biodrones known as Warframes. These hybrid lifeforms were created by infecting human test subjects with the Helminth infestation, a process that was overseen by Archimedians such as Einike. However, these prototype Warframes broke free of their restraints and turned against the Orokin forces, and so the project was shelved and the Warframes slated to be destroyed. In the midst of the Old War, the Zariman unexpectedly returned to the Origin system, bereft of all crew but the colonists' children. Archimedian Margulis treated the orphaned survivors, putting the children into a dreaming slumber to heal them from their trauma. She developed lotus-shaped stasis pods that allowed the children to better channel their emotions while dreaming, forming the basis of what was later called transference. Her work with the Zariman children, now known as Tenno, underwent a dramatic pivot when it was discovered quite by accident that the dreaming Tenno could control the failed Warframes through transference. Although Margulis resisted the weaponization of her young wards, her wishes were overridden, and the Warframe project was restarted, this time with a focus on developing combat units suited to work with the Tenno, who were placed into a second, deeper dream in order to control the Warframes and suppress their own identities. This became one of the Orokin's main war efforts. Executor Ballas assumed personal control of the project, and other Archimedians such as Sylvana were recruited to work on the Warframes. Margulis, who was also Ballas's lover, enjoyed wide latitude as the project's chief Archimedian, but was deeply upset at the project's direction. Although Margulis complied for a time, eventually she could no longer stand to witness what was happening to her adopted children, and she openly rebuked the Orokin for their treatment of the Tenno. She was promptly executed, demonstrating that not even a top scientist was immune from the ire of the Seven. During the Old War, other Archimedians continued to serve in a variety of roles. Archimedian Suda studied the history and legacy of the Orokin, helping the Empire learn from its mistakes to gain the advantage. Once she realized she was suffering from degenerative memory loss, she volunteered to become a Cephalon so that her knowledge would not be lost. Archimedian Yavi was an incredible teacher, with a passion to educate as many as he could in radiant science. The Orokin feared the prospect of widespread education, and Yavi was imprisoned and eventually executed. Other Archimedians continued to work with Parvos Granum, leading to the development of spectre particles able to mimic behaviors and abilities, even those of a Warframe. The Orokin tried to take this invention by force, and when that failed, settled for an alliance with Parvos, likely so that specters could be deployed on the front lines of the Old War. With the end of the Old War and the later collapse of Orokin civilization, the Archimedians vanished along with other trappings of the Empire. The only Archimedians known to survive into the current era are Sylvana, Suda, and Yonta, though none in their original human forms. Archimedian Yonta mentions a group of Archimedian seniors, possibly a sort of governing or advisory body. She also recalls regular symposia, where Archimedians would present their work before the executors, and those projects or individuals deemed unsatisfactory were eliminated. This is likely depicted in the Detron Crewman synthesis entry, where one Archimedian specializing in genetics is executed by Jade Light, and Parental narrowly avoids the same fate by arguing his case to the Orokin. Lastly, Yonta mentions ethics boards, indicating that the Archimedians were familiar with scientific ethics even if their Orokin overlords were not. Kaylee Entrati mentions an Archimedean collegium and that she was denied an application based on a technicality. The collegium may have been the educational or accreditation system for aspiring Archimedians. Why Kaylee was denied entry is unknown. The Entrati family as a whole demonstrate that science and study were not the exclusive domains of the Archimedians. Suda and Yonta are both seen to wear black or dark gray uniforms and an accompanying cape-like Sayandana. Drusus Laverian says that the robes are indicative of Archimedian status, and Yavi was permitted to wear them even while in prison. Drusus describes the robes as white, but this may have been a color reserved for Archimedians emeriti if such a distinction existed, or it may simply be a mistake in a centuries-old story. Yonta's robes feature additional gold filigree detail, including a headpiece, which may have signified her prominent role amongst the Zeraman crew. Suda wore a much simpler diadem. Both Yonta's and Suda's headpieces feature a gray gemstone on the forehead, which is curiously similar to the black gem embedded in the forehead of Scoria assassins, raising the possibility that caste may have been signified with different colored gemstones in the Orcan Empire. A final detail about the Archimedean organization is the presence of an oath, mentioned by Archimedian Suda. From context, it appears to be a lifetime commitment, and may also indicate that the Archimedian is locked into their specialization and cannot change fields. This sets Archimedians apart from mere scholars. To an Archimedian, study and research is not merely an occupation, it is their life's purpose. The Archimedians represented a curious caste in Orcan society, and possibly the most complex. They were responsible for most of the known technological breakthroughs and developments in Orcan history, a distinction that carries a not insignificant degree of culpability. However, a review of Archimedean personalities and institutions reveals a more nuanced tale. Archimedians were, almost to a person, obsessed with their projects and passions, seeking always to improve and perfect to continue the work. On many occasions, their personal morals brought them into conflict with their Orcan patrons, who only concerned themselves with prestige and power without regard to the consequences. The Orokin used the symposium and the threat of execution to keep the Archimedians in line and ensure their research proceeded along approved avenues. Yet from time to time, principled individuals dared to defy the Golden Lords and paid the ultimate price. The Archimedians' legacy lives on through their works, with several major factions owing their modern existence to those who pushed the boundaries of human knowledge. The full impacts of the Archimedians may be expanded on in the future as we uncover more information. But for now, all we can do is study, analyze, and wait.